is Leo. Welcome to this week's political podcast. Today, I am here with guest Mr. Leopold Spohngellert of 8th grade humanities. Mr. S., thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, today I'm just going to talk to you about the recent political news. There's been a lot going on lately, so let's hop right into it.
Yeah, let's go for it. Definitely.
All right. So, I have to ask you a few questions. How did you feel about Biden winning the election?
Well, it was a pretty amazing moment when Biden did win the election. I think that for many weeks I had been checking the polls, and the polls suggested that he was in a good position. But then on election night, it turned out that it was going to be much closer than we all expected. So when I went to bed on election day, I really didn't know who was going to win. And then we had to wait for about 4 days. I was checking my phone every day to see if the election results would be verified. And then finally, when we did find out on Saturday that he had won, I felt overjoyed. Not that the election of Joe Biden will fix the problems we face in this country, but I think that we have tackled a real threat to our democracy by removing this president, assuming he does leave office in January.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think that it's important that he does leave office. He has been really pushing back against the election results. He's been saying that they're fraudulent. He's been trying to sue states. He has been trying to change the results, and he's been saying that that he will not leave the White House. He is refusing to concede the election. How do you feel about this?
He's trying to cheat, right? And I try to teach my students to play games by the rules, right? And then we all need to accept defeat if we do lose in a sports game or of an election. We all have to we can't be sore losers, right? So he's kind of being a sore loser.
Yeah, I think that that's very evident. So I kind of want to change topics from the president to the president-elect, because Joe Biden has not been in the spotlight as much recently because Trump has had this drama going on. But how do you feel about his choice of vice president? Because
that's a really good question. How do you feel about it?
I'm very excited. I feel like I know that the first woman vice president is not going to fix sexism in this country, but it's a huge step forward. I think that it's really important because, like we've been seeing with the George Floyd protests, and I mean, this is just an example, but George Floyd had a lot of attention, and then Breonna Taylor's case somehow managed to go without the police officers being charged, while Derek Chauvin was charged with second-degree murder. So I think it's amazing that we will have this former prosecutor in a high-ranking seat. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't even really thought about the fact that Senator Harris, now Vice President-elect Harris, has that history as a prosecutor, and that might influence whether we're able to get justice for these terrible tragedies that we've seen this year. I don't know whether the Biden administration is going to try to pursue charges against these officers who have committed murder, but that's a really interesting idea, Leo. And one thing else that I think is really important is that Kamala Harris is not afraid to say Black Lives Matter. And she's not afraid to talk about Black Lives Matter in public. I think that she speaks eloquently about issues of race in a way that perhaps Joe Biden isn't quite as eloquent. And I'm looking forward to seeing them prioritize racial justice when they come into office. Now, I do think that there are many questions that remain to be answered about how they will pursue racial equity. They claim it's one of their 4 main priorities, but we know there are many constraints on the executive branch, and we know that they are very moderate. So are they going to try to tackle some of the issues in policing that we have in this country, or are they going to play nice with the police? Are they going to try to address systemic racism in a way that feels meaningful to Black and brown communities, or are they going to take actions that are not very impactful, right? We need to see whether they're willing to make that investment of political capital into tackling systemic racism. Because we know for a fact that Black and brown voters put them in office, right? The majority of white voters voted for Donald Trump, both women and men. And Latino voters, Black voters, and voters of other groups, including Native American voters, are the people who put them in the office, right? So they should be aware of who voted for them and what are the needs of those communities.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point that you make, because the people who put them in office, who have been discriminated against a lot more than the people who tried to keep them from being put in office, need to be prioritized, because people who are white have been front and center and still are front and center. And that needs to change, because I know that a lot of people are discriminated against every single day, and it makes their lives so much harder. And even though there are some people who think that they get stronger from that, we still need to find ways that make people feel better about themselves and feel stronger, not ways that make people feel stronger because they have to deal with this emotional trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And it saddens me to think there are many Democrats after the election already who are saying that they lost seats in the House because of the defund the police movement. I don't know if you've noticed this in the news, but many Democrats are saying, well, we can't be talking about defund the police anymore because it's a toxic phrase. And all I have to say about that is if you're afraid to fight for people in communities, and if you're afraid to tackle the issue of police brutality in this country, then you don't deserve to be in office. Now, that's not to say I believe in defunding the police necessarily. I think there are many things that we can do about policing in this country. I think certain areas we should defund the police, especially in New York City where we have a bloated budget. But I think that being afraid about talking about defund the police and considering police brutality means maybe you're not qualified to be in office.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that a lot of Democrats lost seats, and I thought that was really interesting, because it looks like in a lot of Democratic states, even, like New York and California, the Republicans managed to flip seats, and I thought that was odd, because you would think if people turn out for the president, they would also turn out for the Congress people. But I think that you make a really good point. Some people are not ready for this. They're not built for this.
People were told in this election that Donald Trump is an existential threat. So a lot of voters went to the polls and said, okay, I'll vote against Trump, but I'm still going to vote for this Republican or that Republican. And I think that the Democrats are going to be in a really weird position now where they can't just run around saying that, Trump is the danger and you have to vote for a Democrat. They're going to have to explain why you should vote for a Democrat other than they're not Donald Trump, right? They're going to have to put forward their vision for how to heal this nation in a way that appeals to voters. And I think that voters don't appreciate just being told, you have to vote for the Democrats because Donald Trump is a bad person. Or you have to vote for Democrats because of the color of your skin, right? People don't want to be told what to do. And so the Democrats have to actually make a strong argument.
Yeah, I agree, because there are some people who know what the Republicans are talking about, but there are also these people who might be new to the country, who might be new to voting, or just don't follow politics that much. And they don't know about what each party cares for. Trevor Noah actually showed a clip of someone who flipped a coin on election day to decide who they were voting for. And I feel like that's not how you should vote. You can't take these two totally different people and flip a coin to decide which policies you like.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I thought it was really interesting that some people were so carefree and they didn't talk as much about politics, because that can be a real threat to our democracy too. Our democracy is built on people who vote for the candidate that they want. And the thing is, if you don't know which candidate you want, then you need to look at both of the candidates.
Well, sometimes people don't want either candidate, and they're frustrated, right? They're frustrated at being told, I've got to pick one of these people, and I don't like either of them. People are fed up with that. And at a certain point, people disengage.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point.
I mean, with Joe Biden, he's got a lot of really admirable qualities, but he also voted for the war in Iraq. Yeah. He also voted for the 1994 crime bill, which many people blame our mass incarceration system on, right? Joe Biden has made some tough decisions that have affected people's lives, and it was hard for people to vote for him. Yeah. In many cases.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. No one is perfect. And I think that in some cases you need to choose the better candidate, but in other cases you can look at other parties like the Green Party, independents, and there are still candidates on the ballot who are running for the Green Party. And I think if you're really not satisfied with either candidate, look into some smaller candidates who you might actually be really satisfied with.
That's true. There are third-party candidates, These third-party candidates don't have a lot of power, but if that's what you want to do, it's better to vote than not to vote at all, probably, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, you need to exercise your right to vote to show that it matters, even if your candidate doesn't win. And just on the topic of voting, how did you feel about the record turnout on both sides?
I'll answer this question, and then I think we have to wrap up, Leo.
Yeah.
I felt that the record turnout was extremely encouraging. I am still frustrated to see that there are many communities of color that have to face these really long lines. But I am encouraged to see that despite the Republicans' efforts to make it hard to vote, people got out there and they exercised their right to vote in this year of record turnout. And I think that we're booting Donald Trump from office because of it.
Yeah. All right. Let's end on that note. Mr. S, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Leo.
All right. We'll see you some next time on Political Podcasts.